I'm Sarah Nagel. I've spent my career leading research and product development within some of the world's largest brands.
And I'm Chad Reynolds. I'm a serial entrepreneur and founder and CEO of Verve.
And this is AI Powered by People.
Each episode will dive into the latest AI developments and talk to an industry leader to help you better understand and utilize AI.
We'll take you inside some of the world's most famous companies and share examples of how AI is improving innovation, consumer engagement, media, and marketing.
No matter what industry you work in, we'll help you navigate one of the biggest disruptions to organizations and people today.
Hey, Chad, how you doing? Where are you today?
I was going to ask the same about you. Where are you?
I am in a lodge near Mount Sunapee in New Hampshire because the power has gone out in my house. Luckily, we have a generator to keep the fridge and everything going, but it's not strong enough to power the internet. So I am at it's beautiful. I'm looking at a mountain right now. It's absolutely lovely, and it's a cute little.
This was like an ice storm or what?
Yeah, it was a nice storm. Well, first we got a ton of snow, and then we got a little bit of rain, and then we got a really cold temperature. So everything's covered in ice, and so that pulled down power lines. It knocked over trees, and so
Welcome to the lodge. Welcome to the lodge, the AI lodge.
Yeah, just down the street is Steven Tyler. He's got a house right down the street too.
Get him on. Bring him on. Bring him on.
Steven.
Yeah.
I'm in a new place, but where are you right now?
Yeah, I'm in a new place. Well, I guess I've been here before, but we're on spring break. So down at the in-laws in Greenville, South Carolina. So I'm like buried in like I guess an office space upstairs. So I might get attacked by my three young girls under the age of 7. So they might make an appearance.
That's fine.
We'll see.
That'd be great. I'd love to hear what they think about AI and what's coming up next.
They love it. Don't tell them about their bedtime stories.
All right. So this is the third installment of our South by Southwest episodes.
And final. Third and final.
Third and final. This week we're going to be chatting with Zainab Behzadnia, who is the entrepreneur and strategist and founder of IMANNIA, which is a mental health coaching startup. But before we get to the interview with Zainab, let's take a look at what's in the headlines.
Sarah, there was a ton going on last week. Do you want to?
Well, I didn't know because I was in an ice storm. Can you? I was without power.
There were two. I guess probably the two biggest stories. If you haven't heard, you've heard by now, right?
I've heard you talk about it. Yeah.
All right. So after raising a whopping $1.3 billion, Inflection AI is essentially being eaten alive by its biggest investor, Microsoft. So if you haven't heard of Inflection, they raised, like I said, a bunch of money building out a new chatbot and also a foundational model. So the co-founders, one of we talked about before, Mustafa Suleyman, who was at Davos talking about AI and the responsibility around AI, was one of the co-founders. So he is now the CEO of Microsoft AI, a new division at the company. So this is a pretty major deal for a whole host of reasons. Inflection, some of their biggest competitors was OpenAI and ChatGPT. And this really signals a couple different things. One, Microsoft is in I'd say like winner take all position because they both invested in Inflection and OpenAI. They are under a lot of scrutiny just from regulatory reasons of what they can do mergers and acquisitions on. So acquiring a company is different than essentially absorbing all of their employees, which is kind of what took place here. But it's a way for them to bring on a ton of capacity, both in kind of human engineers and power, but also Inflection was one of the biggest users of compute with NVIDIA's chips last year. So it was a pretty big get for Microsoft.
So what do you think this means for some of the other big players that are out there? Like, how do you think Google's going to react to this?
Yeah, this is really one of those things where you start to kind of assemble your teams. I think you're going to get fewer, bigger uh, AI solutions, especially when we're talking about LLMs and also the experience around them, which
Hmm.
require a ton of compute power. So, um, you're gonna be raising billions of dollars or needing to join up with other organizations that are that have that capital to be able to create these things. So you're going to have fewer bigger players in this
Hmm.
space, as opposed to what Inflection was doing. You know they were another organization in the mix, that I think everybody was excited to see what they were building, what kind of experience was different than like a Microsoft like Bing or a Google Chat. I don't know. It was just a very interesting approach to how you might search knowledge, create knowledge,
Hmm.
and now, not only with them leaving, but also kind of the remnants of the company, who are going to be shifting more into enterprise applications. So yeah, just so much, so much going on here with that
Yeah,
one.
it's interesting to think about that from the consumer perspective, like how they're going to react when they start to see, or how we will react as consumers when, you have a lot of choices with the AIs that you use, and people definitely have affinities for certain kind of how they use different programs. So once they start to consolidate, do people want, fewer choices, or do they appreciate having more choice right now? I don't know. I gravitate to a few different types of AI, but I like having some choice. I like being able to choose the platforms that I like to use, but hopefully they'll be able to kind of maintain their own uniqueness potentially
Hmm.
as they move on to these big companies, because it almost seems inevitable that it's going to happen, but it's
Yeah,
how do you still give people a good consumer experience through these acquisitions?
yeah. I mean, we've kind of been through an exaggerated or accelerated discovery process where you had lots of investments, you had lots of launches of different AI platforms and LLMs. And, in similar fashion, you kind of had companies that would create things. Some are interesting, some are not. Um, this has been really just accelerated where, the bigger companies will gobble up some of the smaller players who are doing interesting things, so that, to your point, you don't necessarily have a bunch of options. You've got a few big players that you go to, who are kind of taking all the talent.
Yeah, because there's so many companies that are out there that are offering different things, but then there's the big guys, there's the big players, and we'll
Yeah.
see kind of how they
Yeah. I mean,
start
it
to
takes a
scoop them
lot
up.
of money to run compute
Yeah.
for training.
All right. Well, shifting gears a little bit, NVIDIA wants to replace nurses with AI for $9 an hour, which is the headline that we saw, which this aligns with some of the conversations we've had about healthcare in the past. But your health could soon be in the hands of NVIDIA-powered AI nurses, and they could cost you and your provider way less. So they announced the collaboration with Hippocratic AI. It's a healthcare company that offers generative AI nurses who work for a lot cheaper than nurses do now. And they could offer you it's during like it's the administrative stuff that we've been talking about. It's
Hmm.
being able to kind of offset some of those things, do intake, do the kind of the paperwork part of the nurse's job. So it's interesting. It definitely falls in line with some of the conversations we've had about humanizing AI in different
Right.
ways.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure I'm not alone. And if you've recently been to a doctor, taking your like for me, taking my family members to doctors, I don't know, like 80 to 90% of the time spent is just collecting data.
Hmm.
There's zero consultation in that time. Um, so I don't know.
I think that this could be scary to a lot of people. I think this is a really good thing. To your point, I think this is offering more human time. So
Yeah.
I think it's using tech for good in a lot of
Yeah.
ways, especially with nurse shortages. There's not enough people to do the work right now. And we can point the humans that are there towards other humans to have those interactions and have the AI or the AI agents or potential robots kind of working on the other stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Who
So.
knew you had to upgrade to get a human nurse? So now we know.
Next up is AI image generator Midjourney blocks. This is a very political headline, but
Yeah. Do we need a
blocks.
disclaimer before this one?
We might.
Okay.
I think it's pretty bipartisan. Images they it's blocking images of Biden and Trump as an election looms. So Midjourney, the CEO, has said that they will block people trying to create images of President Trump and President Biden, because the election is upcoming. And so it's just completely blocking that. They basically just want to be out. They don't want to be part of
Yeah.
it, which is
Yeah.
very different than what we saw in Indonesia, a couple months back too, where, they were using AI to help someone become elected.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure there's a bunch of different ways around this just to describe, as opposed to using their name, just use descriptions of it.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I'm wondering how much this is actually protecting as opposed to just a headline.
Yeah, it may be. I think it's probably more about using like source imagery and things like that versus like describing a politician.
Yeah, I'm not going to share my prompts with you on this one. So,
all right, moving on.
Yeah.
YouTube adds new AI generated content labeling tools, which means that, if you're using any sort of AI tools, it creates a label. So people that are watching your content know where it's coming from.
Yeah. And it looks like this is completely up to the user to accept the labels. So, but I think it's helpful just to create, kind of remove some of the steps needed to do that.
Yeah.
I'm also curious how it will impact your viewing experience of reading that label and then watching content.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I feel like watching any content right now, I don't trust that it's real. So I don't know.
That's what I was saying before. Like, do you really need a label? Or is it that eventually we're going to have a label for real content, not like content that's been
I think it's going to be the other way around pretty soon, where like this is like,
This
it's
is a
like
real
organic,
Yeah.
like this is organic content. This is real. Because otherwise there's, it could be just a little thing that people are tweaking. It could be a filter. It could be a lot of different things that they're using AI for. But I don't know. I just expect like when I'm looking at something, it's, something has been altered.
No, I agree. I mean, I wonder where those like non-GMO stickers are going to come through for originally produced content.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like we're getting there pretty fast. So
yeah,
I know it took a while for our food to get there, but this seems like the reverse. Yeah,
I think it will. All right. Next up is OpenAI to showcase Sora to Hollywood studios for possible integration. So Sora, just to remind you, is it creates quick video clips about a minute long based on the prompts that you give it. So really beautiful, really realistic looking imagery. And so now they're connecting with studios in Hollywood, and this is coming after OpenAI has also had conversations with CNN and Fox and kind of other organizations.
I mean, this is inevitable. Just anytime you have better ways, faster, cheaper ways to accomplish what you're after, are always going to be explored.
So Steve would say that it's the fast food of content because it's cheaper and it's faster, but it's not better. And because you can't create whole movies or whole scripted, series or films, but you can create pieces of it, but not all of it. And also you can't see it exactly the way that you would want to as a human. We're not there yet. We can kind of it can help generate things, but it's not going to be perfect quite yet.
And the key thing is yet.
Yeah. Exactly. But now let's get to our interview with Zainab Behzadnia. And again, Zainab is the founder of the mental health coaching startup IMANNIA. And I'm excited to hear what she has to say about the intersection of wellness and AI. You ready?
I'm ready. Let's go.
Hey, Zainab. Welcome to the podcast.
Absolutely. Honestly, yes. That's exactly how it worked out.
Cool. So what we wanted to do is, I know we want to talk a little bit about IMANNIA, kind of what you're doing right now, and also just some of the really interesting opportunities around AI and mental health. So first, maybe you can share a little bit of background, and then also like what you're working on right now.
Yeah, so I come from the marketing world. I started in action sports, and I was an athlete publicist for all the folks you may remember from the X Games. I was Shaun White's first publicist, and a lot of amazing athletes. And I really connected to the storytelling and connecting with the individuals to tell their story. And this was still in the analog days, right? So digital was just coming to the forefront. So I was part of that evolution of how do we move to use technology in publicity and marketing in the early, they called it like new media marketing, right? Look at how far we've come. That sounds foreign. Like websites didn't exist. And from there, branched off and started a digital marketing agency and a PR firm. And while I was always on the marketing side and business development, but I, in building a company as an entrepreneur, you get to wear many hats. And a lot of that also includes having to interact with people, nurture talent, manage. And marketing for me was always that as well, but you were trying to create that connection between the, consumer and the product. I have always had this affinity and connection for how do you, establish trust as a brand and inspire action. And that was actually the tagline for our company at the time. And after 15 years of doing that, we set them up both for acquisition. I wanted to focus more on the people side doing the work, right? Having experienced burnout personally, gone through the entrepreneurial journey, seeing how lonely it can be, how hard it is to empathize with the people you're working with and having work, with your goal in mind, and still, wanting to be a part of their team, but also having to have that distinction and separation of, no, I've got this and I can carry us through, or we can carry this. That it takes a toll on you, and there's great reward in entrepreneurship, but there is room for a lot of support that's often hard to access. Either it's expensive or the competitiveness of, the industries that you're in. You don't want to show your hand as to where you might need some help and challenges. And so I was like, well, if I could be that person, especially for women, because we have added layers of pressure and things that, we have to navigate in addition to our career aspirations. Why not kind of focus on the purpose side of it?
About the positives, success stories of an entrepreneur, but very much so not the part where it doesn't work out.
Yeah, and often, even not just in entrepreneurship, but just in managing and working with others, right? When you haven't worked through the stuff that you're dealing with, you bring it to work because you are the vessel that's showing up, right? And so this allowed me to serve in another way. And I've had such an amazing opportunity to kind of, get to know people and connect with them and have the attunement of noticing, hey, what's going on today? And taking that minute to just check in with someone makes a difference, right? So who's checking in with the people who have to check in with everyone else? So
we're particularly interested in AI,
yes.
artificial intelligence, and so curious about how you believe you might be able to use AI in the work that you do.
AI at first scared me, right? So,
why?
Well, because it was the image that you see in Hollywood, like it's going to be robots are going to take over the world, and it feels foreign. And then I thought to myself, what did people go through when we started to introduce technology in other times in history, right? We moved from the horse and buggy to a car. We moved from, doing everything by hand to computers. And honestly, I don't think there's anything artificial about intelligence. It's just amplified intelligence. It's the collection of intelligence that we have, right? I can't imagine our lives today without computers, from medical equipment down to, your phone, right? So there's so many ways that it plays out. And I was like, what happens if I step out of the fear and embrace the opportunity in it? And so in the mental health space, in the coaching space, therapy space, I'm sure you can all identify with, or even with employers, right? You wish that someone was paying attention, or you wish that they would have noticed something. You go to the doctor, you're trying to explain something to them. They're like, they don't even look up sometimes. They're just looking at your chart. How great would it be if there were means of them being able to really tune into who you are and what's going on, and especially during the off hours. You typically notice people feel worse when they come home on a Friday,
Yeah.
you know,
Are you
out
at
of
home with
business
me?
hours. Right, yes, I am.
You're
I
reading
can
my,
eat.
I know, you're reading my, you're reading my mind.
I can
No, but
eat.
it is an exhausting.
Right?
Yeah.
And you can't call your doctor, you can't call your therapist, and even your therapist is like, you know, make an appointment, I'll see you in 8 weeks. I'm like, my problem is today. You know, how do I address today? And often the anxiety and our nervous systems kind of going into this, you know, helter-skelter space or fight-flight is the need and that urgency for being seen, heard, and believed, right? Like in that moment. It's like having an ER, you know, available to you. So there's so many ways we can use AI. We can use it in education and training of the professionals, right? So that they can, you know, be able to observe what you might miss, right, through some of these tools that are available. What was the cadence of their speech? You know, where were their eyes darting? What are which you're supposed to do as a good practitioner, right? But we also have our days. You're tired. You have brain fog. You have a hangover. Yeah. You know, whatever it is that you're dealing. You got into. So you know, we're human, right? And in the desire for human connection, and we go to these sources for that connection. Right. There's also the reality that that human may not be at their full capacity, not because they don't want to, but because they're having their human experience. So in a way, it's like, hey, this might be an opportunity for us to be able to capture those things in the moment. Imagine waking up in the middle of the night and being able to have a place to share, you know, whether it's through video or audio, whatever it is, and then you get it off your chest, it's been heard, you know it's going to be witnessed, right? That's really important. And then through the magic of all the things that people with a much, you know, more qualifications than I know how to make work, you know, that information is fed to the practitioner, right? And they can say, hey, you know, Zainab looks like she's been struggling a lot with this. Her speech pattern is this. We have wearables with content, right? Like her heart rate was at this. Her sleep pattern looks like this. Maybe you want to look at, you know, addressing this. So even imagine you show up and your, you know, coach or your therapist is like, how's your sleep lately? It's been rough, huh? And you don't have, and you're like, oh, we can start from here, you know? And I often forget by the time it's time for a session or an appointment or, you know, the time that's allotted for me, I'm like, oh, I'm okay. But you know what made it okay was knowing I had the appointment. And so it's like being able to capture that content of what's going on within you and then being able to not have to worry about being the one to necessarily remember it on either party side, right?
Because the reported behavior isn't always, like, you're not necessarily coming with all of that. You may just kind of put it out of your mind. But to be able to have those moments to be able to share it.
Right, and those are the dots that you can connect later and say, oh, you know what, this seems to be a pattern. Before I go to, you know, a big meeting, I have this come up for me. And once you've had the meeting, you may have passed the moment, right? So allowing practitioners to be able to witness that, whether and the more they can do that in their training, the better they can do it in person, right? And it can kind of, I played volleyball, and one of the things that was really important is you always had the other person's back. Like one person goes to hit, and we're all down below waiting in case we got to cover, right? So I can see AI as that tool that helps cover.
Can you talk through maybe some specific like tools or platforms you might be experimenting with now around that experience?
I know that I personally have had to get over my own fear of whether or not this was going to be something that is helpful or harmful, because for me, the human connection and not losing human connection was important. And so in what I realize is it's going to be up to, so this is my invitation to the companies who may be listening, right, is that it's important to bring the humanness and that empathy and the awareness of what may be into your programming, into the thoughtfulness behind what it is that you're doing, into your mission, because it can only enhance and amplify if you do. If you're trying to replace, to be more profitable, to cut costs, and that's the motivation, that will be the experience, you know? But if you're doing it with the person in mind, then, you know, I think there's amazing things that we can build on.
One of the things we've, like Sarah and I've talked a lot about, like our technology, our platform, it just amplifies voices. So, and there's a lot of like I've heard it over and over again with people. So we work with a brand doing research. The consumer at the end was like, this feels therapeutic to say it out loud, versus like answering a survey or things like that. So there's definitely truth to just saying it out loud.
And also a little bit like less pressure sometimes, like when you're alone and you have those thoughts. It's kind of like a diary in a way.
Remember the old, oh my gosh, the MTV shows with they would have
the
diary
confessionals.
sessions,
Yeah.
right? Like the confessionals, and that's where we connected with individuals, because maybe you saw their behavior a certain way, but then they were able to be in their version of, I understand a lot of these things were produced, but that's why we journal,
Yeah, absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
That's one opportunity. But when we're becoming more of a face-to-face, culture.
Yeah.
And so being able to capture that in
Yeah.
that moment,
But
and then have someone wanting to actually receive that information is
And
also
do something
helpful.
with it.
Yeah, and do
Because
something.
it's a huge data point. Like you're
Huge.
But then you're literally transcribing, journaling, talking out loud, video recording. Yeah. And so that's like a big determiner.
Texture of your thoughts, the speed at with which you think, the pauses. When you're working with clients, in my space, those are the nuggets, right, that we receive the most information is sometimes in what's not being said. So being able to observe that visual representation and the body language is also, invaluable.
I'm curious about like health trends. So like ways that AI could potentially kind of over time, like in thinking about not just one individual, but maybe many, about health trends. How do you imagine AI being able to be supportive in that?
Let's take a group that I'm becoming more and more familiar with, which is women falling into the perimenopausal space, right? How often do you go to your doctor describing symptoms and then they're like, oh, it's normal, you're just going through this, right? But now when you have data points that can actually see when you are going through your individual journey that is this collective experience with this population, right? Then there can be more tools, resources, food, products, that can be adjusted and tailor-made, but with information.
Yeah,
right.
Not just personalized to be personalized.
Yeah,
personalized with
exactly.
data.
But with data, and I am one of those data types. So my doctors are like, I don't know any other person who has this much information on themselves, and it's more work for me. So having that tool available where I can speak to something or record something, and I have the wearables and everything else, and that goes into a database or, that can be collected and look at, okay, this person hit this at this age, which may or may not be common, but these are the things that they're experiencing. So what can we do to get people prepared? In this specific example, how do we get women prepared for what's coming up so it's not such a surprise? And as with like any rule of branding, a good brand is one that's connected to and is listening to and anticipating your needs. And that's the thing, is that you're kind of cueing what may be needed in the future.
Yeah, I mean, you're kind of building out your own prototype using all of your own data and then defining what experience you would want to have.
Exactly.
And then you can build tools, resources, all different kinds of things around it to not necessarily feel alone in that space.
The other side of that, if I can touch on, is the scary part around that is privacy, I think, and how is this information going to be used? And again, that's my invitation, that we can only hope to trust that the people that are, innovating in these spaces continue to keep that in the forefront. And the great thing is that we have the examples of, what has social media, what have been some of the negative impacts of social media. It's an amazing, tool, and it's provided insane amounts of connectivity, awareness, activism. Like, there's so many ways that we've been able to mobilize and connect and do all these wonderful things through social. And then there's, what I like to say, the shadow side or the challenges. But we know that those things exist. So how can we factor that in going into it knowingly, right? And that's the benefit that I think would help kind of quell some of those concerns.
I mean, the data is all available. I think everybody's been struggling with their own way. yeah, I'm just excited about all. I think we have all the puzzle pieces,
Yes.
and now it's just with a lot of social shifts of things that were kind of hidden in the back are now out in public a lot more and being discussed. And so now it's just crafting solutions of the experience you want to have. Yeah, it's a huge opportunity.
And when your objective and your mission is to enhance human connection, that's, it's the intention of anything, right? So you're going in that direction. The rest of it kind of falls into place, and you discover things along the way, and they have a way of working themselves out. But I think that's really like your golden ticket.
Absolutely.
Is that you want to use technology to amplify. You want to use technology to create greater acceptance.
Everybody wants to belong.
Can you talk about ways, like you're talking about, like amplifying the human experience? Like what are ways that you could imagine, like kind of you could dream it up, where AI could enable us to be more human and more present and kind of like have really deep connections?
So it's interesting. After I had the call about joining you guys today, I just happened to be speaking to a friend, and I said, this was unplanned, but I'm going to be at South by and I'm going to be participating in this podcast, and this is the subject. And he's like, oh my God, with this like huge sigh of relief. I'm like, what's going on? And he goes, I have a young son, and I'm a single dad, and the challenges around that in itself, and then he was navigating his own stuff. And he's like, I use ChatGPT to act as a coach and therapist for my son when I don't have the capacity, right? And so he's shown him how to talk to the platform and know that that's a safe space for him, and he can kind of go through that. He, as the parent, can also then review and see what comes up when, especially for children, like they don't have the same kind of inhibitions that we have yet. Theirs are in another way. And so what a beautiful way to be able to expand your capability when you don't have that capability. And that connection, I know it sounds like, oh, this is a parent-child thing, but this is how you ripple effect into the world, right? If you don't have the capacity to talk to your partner at the time, and they have a place to go and they can decompress through this, they show up in a different way. That connection is enriched, and then whomever they talk to and kind of deal with on the outside. I gave the example earlier of practitioners and therapists and stuff and having their own limitations, but managing people, it's not an easy thing to do. And I know people specifically who are like, I would never want to be a people manager. I don't want to be an entrepreneur because I don't want to have to deal with this aspect of business. And there's a whole opportunity loss just because you don't want to deal with that. But that can create the opportunity for you to, I'm so tempted to say outsource. I'm going to say it because that's the word in my head, but it's more about, call in the tribe that you need to help.
I mean, even just using it. I mean, I use it. I have 3 little girls under the age of 7. Like writing bedtime stories that are personal to them based off of something.
Awesome. I didn't know you did that.
Oh yeah. So like before we, but like before we go in the bedroom, and I'm sitting there in the bed, and I'm like, what happened today? What was the most fun thing? What happened here? And then I'm just like typing it in to my phone, and then I'm writing a story in real time about their day. What was the biggest challenge? But using different characters. But like I would never have that resource to me to be able to take what happened during the day, let them process it in a different way before nighttime, but do it different every single night.
Brilliant.
Because look at the intuitiveness there, even in your decision of how you're using the tool, right? That's the important part, I think. And the better we're connected with ourselves, the better we understand your desire to connect with your daughters in a very meaningful way. Like the simple question in itself is one huge piece that is missing for a lot of people. No one's asking about what's going on in their day and how. And so then taking the time to capture that and then going back and giving it back to them in another way. And we know like kids often in their make-believe or in their imagination are really just working through the things that they're dealing with in real life, right? And so for you to bring that back to them allows them to have that perspective.
I mean, I wish it was like packaged. I mean, it should be packaged as a product. I'm like totally hacking it together, but like if a Disney or someone put that together and I could plug these things in, they're just helpful tools to create stories in a much more personal way, like even using characters that they're familiar with already.
And, it would be great to have all of these tools. But I think the beauty of what's available now and the democratization of all of this, again, is the accessibility. So another
Create your own
A
solution.
around that is like, you came up with that. And you don't have to wait for another company to do something. If you have an idea, there's a way to kind of figure out how to do this, maybe on a small scale for yourself, but you're not limited to waiting and wishing and wanting and hoping. You can get into the creating.
So literally, I have one button on my phone. I was like, here's how I'm feeling. Here's what I wish I had. Oh wait, what if I did this? And like 5 seconds later, I had a prototype, and just kept at it.
That's great. So we've got one last question. How can you imagine using AI to amplify the voices? This is a little bit different. Amplify the voices of female entrepreneurs.
I'll speak from my experience. Truth and honesty can only exist in your willingness to be vulnerable. Vulnerability can only exist if you feel safe. And so if there is no safety, the rest doesn't show up. So oftentimes we even lie to ourselves about how we feel. We're dismissing it. We are then kind of building on that lie, right? So if I'm overwhelmed and I'm not, feeling supported or feel like I have a place to show that overwhelm, I don't want it broadcast. I just need it heard. I just need to know that someone understands and that maybe I can have some support in that. Especially if you are the head, if you're the one leading. There's this thing that I had to dance with, which, when you are being trained as a leader and a manager, let's say in corporate, there's this distinction between boundaries and not bringing the personal into business, and there's these fine lines. But in entrepreneurship, and often they'll tell you, oh, it's like a family. Well, most families are dysfunctional first, but you want to be able to be your human self because you're going through it at the same time, but you want them to not lose trust or to take on your worry. It kind of gets a parent-child dynamic. And so if there will be more resources through AI available, and your platform offers a lot of these ways of how we can use it too, is if I can be heard and I can have that moment to get that support, and then going back to your earlier question of how it could then be like part of the collective, and I can then have tools and resources provided back to me, in that safe space where I can be honest and I'm not risking losing employees because they feel like, this may not go anywhere.
Right.
There's a lot of fear in entrepreneurship. You're taking huge chances daily. And your concern is that I have to carry other people in addition to my big dream, in addition to the big goal and vision and mission that I have. So I think as a woman, I've often signed up for the cause, and I've dismissed my own needs. I've dismissed the fears and feelings and tools that I've needed in the name of whatever has to be done. And so I think in that way, that would be helpful.
Well, we're excited to stay in touch and just see what you're building and how to help.
It was so nice to meet you. Thanks for
Lovely
coming.
to meet you
You
both.
too.
Well, that was a cool interview with Zainab while we were at La Condesa.
Takes me back. I want tacos now.
I know,
Let's
I
do it.
know. I can smell them.
Yeah.
It was really cool to hear about kind of mental health and AI, and it reminded me of the conversation we had with Rich from Otter, and thinking about those conversations we was having, where you were, asking about the little otter on your shoulder.
Yeah.
But you could imagine, kind of playing back conversations either with a healthcare provider or a therapist, or it could maybe prompt you with interesting questions. I mean, I think there's a lot of ways that AI could help in the kind of mental health space.
Yeah, I mean, these are easy, in my opinion, these are very easy wins for someone. I mean, just being able to prompt me, you apply it to me. not like the world revolves around me, but if I had like in my pocket, if I at the end of every day, you had some like reflection time of like, hey, what was the most difficult thing to happen today? What was the part that you wish you could do over? What was the being able to talk out loud to that is therapeutic, and I think using AI for that type of experience, but also to get from you what those things are, and then play it back to you, or keep track of it over time, and understand like your sentiment, the words that you're using, what your emotions were. Even looking at like your face, like I don't really show a ton of emotions, but I'm assuming most people do. But being able to detect those things and help you and prompt you and ask you different questions, it just seems like an incredible sensor to collect all different kinds of signals about that, and then be connected to more of a human professional that can help curate and kind of choreograph the next steps.
Yeah, and I think, and you had mentioned this in the past too, like with relationships also, to help you with prompts on conversations to
Yeah,
have,
that didn't go over well. That
but
didn't go
not
over well.
necessarily to have the like what exactly to say, but maybe to like help people resolve things, or help them, help with prompts that kind of would be maybe a tricky subject that you wouldn't necessarily want to bring up, that kind of brings you guys together. So I know I'm coming around on that
No.
conversation.
I personally love it. I think there's a huge opportunity, not just only for like your personal mental health, but also as you're having relationships. I mean, I've kind of joked around about, well, what if you could send a verbe to me, to Nicole, and ask a bunch of questions, take all the things that we're saying and synthesize it into insights or ideas or things like that, or pass it back based on what someone else is saying, pass it back in different ways. And I mean, for me, those are always really inspiring use cases. And I think they're scratching on, kind of a bigger opportunity here. And I can see this working out.
Yeah, because it's a third party that has more insight versus kind of just a a random prompt. But if it really is understanding two people over time, or a family over time, or yourself over time, and gives you prompts, it could really be helpful.
Yeah. I mean, how do you feel once you say things out loud? Does it make you feel better or worse?
I feel better. Yeah. I mean, when I, talk in the shower to myself, yeah, I feel better. It's usually when that happens. But yeah, you kind of just like say things out loud, and you say it's good. It's therapeutic in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Or in the car.
You talk in the shower, you don't sing?
I sing sometimes, but if I know no one is in the house, I'll talk.
You hear like a conversation going on?
Yeah.
I guess so. Okay. All right.
Yeah. I'll talk through presentations. I have to get, there's a number of ways that it's being used, but
all right.
Who knew? View into my life.
Who knew? What a great transition from talking in the shower to talking on the street. So in this next segment, this is our last installment of Sarah at South by Southwest talking to people about their thoughts on AI.
What excites you about AI?
The possibility, at least in the context of innovation, to diverge a lot more than would be possible. It's just the human mind, and then the combination of generative with the human curation of what makes sense, and the diverge, converge, and then to continue feeding it. It's just, I feel like it shortens and compresses the innovation process, and so we're excited about that.
How do you think Alexa feels about ChatGPT?
Probably jealous.
What excites you about AI?
I think it's going to be really cool to be able to maximize time and make things more efficient, collect information more easily. And also, I think the way that it can help in medicine will be pretty awesome.
Do you think you could run your team with just you and a bunch of bots?
Imagine if I said yes and my team listened to this. Absolutely not. Irreplaceable. It's not them versus AI. AI is augmenting it. It's not replacing it.
Well, that's going to do it for this episode of AI Powered by People. The show is produced by Steve Berkowitz and brought to you by Verve. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back next Tuesday.